I'm sure you're all aware that Ireland is a very progressive place. It's always been progressive, highly progressive. And one thing they've always liked is foreigners, actually. Irish big fan of foreigners. And so this is why refugees welcome was such a natural thing for Ireland to adopt when there was, say, a global refugee crisis. You look skeptical.
I'm just thinking of that meme where it's like, what kind of foreigner are you? Yeah.
So Ireland's been massively accommodating to refugees. They seem to be holding, I think it's something like 100,000 refugees, not holding, but hosting.
Demanding ransom.
No, there's not even ransom. No, you can't have them. These are our refugees. We've got them now. Sorry to interrupt the video, but I just want to let you know that we have a brand new selection of merch on our merch store. These won't be in the store forever, so if you do want them, go and get them now. Thanks very much. So they've got 100,000 from Ukraine and tens of thousands others from other places. In fact, they did a breakdown for us, which was in here somewhere. There we go. So they've got 26,000 non-Ukrainians, and out of them, you can see these numbers these are the absolute numbers from 1 week, but they also represent roughly the right percentages in the doc. But as you can see, there are a lot of single males coming in to Ukraine, which is weird, because I would have said that a single male can't be a refugee. So if you're a refugee, you're fleeing from a war zone. In fact, let me get the doc up itself, because there's some good numbers in it.
I mean, unless you're unfit to fight, I don't know why the Ukrainian state would let you leave.
But it's not just the Ukrainian state, because these are the actual numbers when we get to them. There we go. So, 4,000 from Nigeria, 3,700 from Georgia. How are you a refugee from Georgia or Algeria or South Africa or Pakistan or Bangladesh or Albania? I mean, obviously, we're not talking about refugees. And 32% of those are just single males. So again, bit nonsense. But the Irish government, though, despite being highly progressive, they are also a bunch of racists, because they pointed out, well, look, actually, Ireland's only got 5 million people in it, the Republic of Ireland. It's actually not that big. And so if we take 100,000, that's actually a really significant number. And so we end up running out of space, which isn't very thoughtful, I would say. And so lots of them end up sleeping on the streets, which is, what one might expect if this is just being done, on a kind of really wild moral impulse without any regards to the practicalities of what's happening. The Irish government said, look, we've tried to buy up all the houses and rent all the hotels that we can, but it turns out Ireland just isn't that big. And we didn't think about this. The Irish government says, quote, various issues beyond the control of the department for the failure to meet demand. It's like, yes, the Irish government isn't God and actually can't just make houses spring out of the ground. And so tens of thousands of good people took to the streets. Say, no, more. We must have more refugees. Refugees are good.
I love homelessness.
That actually is basically the argument, yes.
More homeless people, please. They only make Dublin better.
Among the wide variety of groups taking part were United Against Racism, the National Women's Council of Ireland, and several political parties.
Want more homeless.
For some reason they do. Weirdly enough, none of them took refugees into their houses. So you might be like, okay, so they actually do want them to live on the streets. I mean, some locals here were interviewed by the Irish Times when far-right protests against asylum seekers housed in the former ESB building started in Dublin's East Wall. Molly felt that she had to do something. So she went down with her own cardboard sign that said, "Refugees welcome." I was really shocked, said her neighbour, Paddy. I thought, is this where I live now? I have a 2-year-old, and seeing parents at the protest with kids, I was like, are these views going to be passed on to my little man? So the Irish equivalent of Liberal Democrats went out and they protest. But none of them took refugees into their own houses, which is weird. In fact, the people on the other side of this were evil racists who were parroting the government's line that, no, actually, Dublin's full. Ireland's full. And so this is just very interesting how the Irish government and the evil racists are in agreement that there's not enough room, but the Irish government want to be good people and so want more refugees. But the Irish government's put in this horrible position where the morals and the reality have diverged and are going in different directions. And they find themselves, unfortunately, with the evil racists, which I particularly like this because, Ireland, as The Guardian tells us, has prided itself on greeting visitors with warmth, styling itself as the land of 100,000 welcomes. But now there's a new slogan, #Ireland is full. I don't think that's the government's official position.
No,
well, it is actually the government's official position, but I don't think that's their official slogan. And so Nigel Farage tweeted out, unlike the English, who say very little, the Irish are speaking out and protesting on the streets. That's true. That's true. And so the evil racists who run Ireland opted in to the EU's deal to tighten immigration controls. Because, of course, in the European Union, during the first 11 months of 2023, 355,000 illegals just arrived on the shores of Europe, just washed by the tide. There's no tide in the Mediterranean, actually. Oh, they must have been coming on purpose. So they just turned up in 2023, and of course, a lot of them have come to France, and so the French government's like, okay, to the channel, despite the fact that we're of course paying them not to do that. My chair's creaking for some reason. If my chair collapses now, I'm going to be very disappointed. And so the point being, the European Union is like, okay, so the evil people who are like Europe for the Europeans are right, and therefore we have struck a major deal to tighten immigration controls and making it easier to deport failed asylum seekers and hold their families in detention centres on the bloc's external borders.
I have heard this for years.
Yeah.
Did you see there's a lot of weird nostalgia about, when Britain was in the EU, we could just deport illegals. It's just
I haven't seen that. No.
It's just
AC Grayling.
So yeah, one of these days we'll get people to the outside skirts of the EU and deport them. And so it's never happened once.
Yeah.
Never once have we dealt with the problem by actually doing that.
No, of course.
So very token efforts have been made, and that's it.
Yeah. But the point is, I mean, detention centres, if I was a good person, I would uncharitably recharacterize those as concentration camps, like AOC did on the southern border of the United States. Anyway, so for years now, they've been blaming Britain's Rwanda policy for why they haven't got room for the Ukrainians.
What? Ireland is blaming us.
Yes. No blame on the refugees who've come from Morocco and Nigeria.
We buy up all the Rwandan house builders? What's the actual argument? I don't understand how that even makes any sense.
Is that the position of the government or of the...
No. This was the Prime Minister, Michael
Huffing
Martin,
cope.
Whose government has taken pride in its open door policy for Ukrainians fleeing war and is already sheltering more than 40,000. Again, this was in 2022. So the Irish Army would open the Irish Army, 7,000 men, would open a tent city on Monday at the Gormanston military camp north of Dublin, shelter the latest arrivals. Martin said that Ireland's facilities were overloaded not because of too many Ukrainians, but because of an unexpected surge in asylum seekers from Africa and the Middle East arriving via Britain. He said the UK government's threat to deport new arrivals from Rwanda has spurred many to exploit the common travel area, which for decades has enabled barrier-free movement between the UK and the Republic of Ireland. Martin said that Britain's plans to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda, which he called a shocking sort of initiative, so as if, again, Rwanda is a safe country, I've been told, by many progressive people. I don't think they're actually just going to be chopped up or anything when they get there, but it's motivated people into utilising the common travel area to come to the Republic. And so this came to my attention. I looked into all of this. It came to my attention because they've realised that, hang on a second, more than 80% of the migrants in Ireland have come from the UK. That means they're British migrants. That means these are the bad ones. That's how you know. So Helen McEntee, the Justice Minister, if I can get the mouse back, has said, hang on a second, they're coming across the border with Northern Ireland. Is that okay? But who wanted to get rid of all the border controls on the border with Northern Ireland? Who wanted that? Who wanted that? Oh, it's so...
Full-on Joker meme right now.
Have you ever heard of the Good Friday Agreement, Callum? 25 years ago, they were gradually dismantled because someone kept committing terrorist attacks because there was a border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. Who was that? Sorry, I'm not aware. I'm not very good at history, you see. It was argued that this would protect the peace process and safeguard Ireland's place in the EU single market. And Brexiteers accused Dublin of weaponizing the border. And so it's like, right, well, we can do something about that. So to prevent what were then Irish nationalists, I mean, they probably are still Irish nationalists, but the government was also in agreement with them. We've allowed refugees to just walk across the border, but the thing is, there is no border. You did this on purpose. This is one of those unexpected consequences that I've heard so much about. And so Rishi Sunak just came out and was like, well, Rishi Sunak came out and was like, well, this is working as planned, actually. It is working as a deterrent because they're going to Ireland. It's like, well, in a way, he's right. You know, can't argue that that's not the case. People are worried about coming here, and that demonstrates exactly what I'm saying. I guess it does. And so the Irish government are like, hey, we're not just going to let the Brits get one over on us, are we? No. We're going to have emergency laws to send the asylum seekers back to the UK.
But there's no border between us. They'll just walk back over, you idiot.
But also, these people aren't from the UK. They're from Algeria or Morocco or Nigeria or Albania or any of the other countries that are not at war.
They do sound like Londoners, yeah, you're right.
Yes. So why send them back to us? I mean, we can't send them back to anywhere, apparently. But if you guys can put in emergency laws to send these people back to where they came from, send them back to where they came from.
Well, they're from, from is not the right word, but this last place they were before coming to Ireland was Belfast. So
correct.
I went to Belfast a year or so ago, and you noticed, I mean, it's ridiculous,
yes,
the amount of people who clearly aren't from there.
Yes.
And all the hotels are booked, the same situation you have in England.
Yes.
And I asked my mate who was there, like, what's going on with all this? And he was like, well, of course, they just walk south, and then they just claim asylum in Ireland, because the Republic can't reject them, and there's no one stopping them. So that's what's happening there. If they send them back to us, if they ever did, we would just put them back in Belfast. We're not deporting them to a third country because we're so piss poor at that. So in which case, they will just walk south to Dublin again.
I don't know why we can't just send them back to where they came from.
But one thing, though, it says there to consider. And now in the last month, they're saying all sorts of stuff. They're saying that they're going to consider all sorts of stuff because they're scared of the upcoming EU elections.
Yeah.
So they really don't know where the people are going to support them or not. So, and they try to say on the one hand that they are listening to them and the results of the referendums, but they also, Helen McEntee said that you need to vote for the EU Migration Pact.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's even more migration.
Yeah.
So
without the EU, I mean, Ireland did opt into the EU Migration Pact.
Yeah.
So they can see that this is coming. But Helen McEntee said, what's clear in the decision the UK have taken in choosing Brexit, they have actually seen an increase in people seeking asylum in their country. The way they deal with that, that's their policy. It's like, well, what? I don't think that the channel migrants are actually a consequence of Brexit. But she says, that's why I'm introducing fast processing. I'll have emergency legislation in Cabinet this week to make sure we can effectively return people to the UK. And it's okay, but if you could just do this anyway, if deportations are back on the table, we're going to get rid of these people, all the way back to Britain, where they came from. It's like, no, send them back to where they're actually from. Like, I mean, we can't do this in Britain for some reason. But anyway, so the question is, well, what's Britain going to do about it? And the answer to that is that Britain is going to refuse to take them back, actually. I don't know how we're going to do this exactly, but the government source has said the UK will not allow returns until the EU accepts that we can send them back to France. So we've got this stupid bureaucratic trail. They're going to come from Dublin back to Belfast, from Belfast back to France, and then back to Spain, wherever they've come from originally, and then back maybe eventually to Morocco, Algeria, and all place beyond. We could just send them there directly.
And none of that would exist if there was actual border policy.
Yes.
None of this would exist.
Yes. But also, just imagine the bureaucratic expense and the legalese that has to take place for them to go to all of these places to eventually get back to where they came from, a place where there is no war. You know, if we were just sensible people, if we had a sensible country, if the EU was a sensible bloc, it would just be like, no, you're not from here, you don't deserve to be here, you're going back the same day, none of this would be happening. But instead, now we're in a diplomatic row with Ireland. And obviously, just to be clear, no, these people shouldn't be in Ireland, in the same way these people shouldn't be in Britain, and they shouldn't be in France or Spain or Portugal or wherever else, Greece. All of these people should just be sent home. Simple as.
It's the same thing. The same thing you mentioned about France and the UK happens also with Greece and Turkey.
Oh, yeah.
And also
Turkey.
the EU and Turkey.
Well, Turkey was extorting the EU. For, I think it was something like 4 billion euros they demanded, or else they were going to literally flood Europe with migrants. And so the European Union paid up. This was a few years ago.
They did it anyway.
Yeah, then they did it anyway.
And also Rishi Sunak was thinking of giving money to Turkey to create a railway network so people could come faster.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't even hear about
I'll find it, yeah.
No, I believe you. I just didn't even hear about it. But yeah, so the point being, we're in a really, really stupid bureaucratic position, but everyone's made this bed and now we're lying in it.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Brokenomics series, this episode on the book Return of the Strong Gods. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.